Hello, David here. Spring is springing here in London. Change and renewal are in the air. And I've been thinking about those sliding door moments. Those moments when you make a choice, sometimes without knowing that it is a choice, and your life changes, maybe forever. I've made some significant decisions in the past few years, and I still don't know if they were smart ones. Being part of this podcast, that was good. Glad I did that. But some of the others, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened if I'd chosen differently. Maybe I won't find out for years, or ever. Anyhow, that got me thinking about our guests here on Why Dance Matters, the Royal Academy of Dance podcast, and how often they describe life-changing moments. So we thought it would be cool to gather a few together. We've got quite a range, from very personal choices that turn out momentous, like hosting a ballet class in your front room, or being part of a life-changing cultural event, like a major movie the whole world is watching. First up, it's Carlos Acosta, the ridiculously charismatic dancer and director of Birmingham Royal Ballet. When he was growing up in Havana in Cuba, ballet seemed very unlikely to shape his life, let alone to save it. I'm David Jays, and let's kick off this special episode of Why Dance Matters with a proper sliding door moment from Carlos Acosta. To go back to the very, very beginning, if dance hadn't been something you happened to be amazingly skilled and passionate about, what would your life have been like, do you think?
God knows. I didn't have a sense of the world as such and my place in it. What I seen was traders, my dad obviously, who was a truck driver, who would go up and down the country transporting fruits. So that was the example. I like football, I like sports, but, sports like football in Cuba is not very well regarded. It's very hard to foresee what my future will be like. And obviously already by the age of 9, I was enrolled into petty crimes and things like that. But I can tell you that most of my friends in the 90s, there was a big crisis in Cuba and they flee the country in raft. Some of them end up being in jail. It's that kind of thing that the environment pulled you to it. And so my environment was at times could be very hostile. It's a very tough question to decipher, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And those kind of sliding door moments where things could go one way or another, you have no idea. But what was the moment when you felt, dance, this is what I should be doing with my life?
I think that moment came at the age of 13 while I was in a border school in Pinal del Rio, which is a city to the west side of Cuba, of Havana, 3 hours away from Havana. And I boarded there for 2 years. And while I was there, I saw the National Ballet of Cuba perform in a theater in town, a very small theater. And I saw this dancer performing a flower festival of Hensano, a Bournonville piece. That was a wake-up call for me. I thought that, wow, this is great, because I immediately associated with the sports, which I like very much, because I was always been very restless kids, and I like to run and playing football, and so I saw this muscly man jumping very high and very effortless. It just captivated my imagination. From that point on, I could understand why I was training. So I was training all these years to become that, become that dancer, that professional. And from that point on, since I was in a boarding school and I have a lot of time to practice extra hours, that's what I did. I became obsessed. It started that practice and that impetus that I put behind all the work that I did. It started to bear fruits because I've been selected for new choreographies. My teacher selected me above everyone else, and that started to fill my confidence.
Sometimes you change, sometimes the world is in flux. Dame Monica Mason is a Vice President of the Royal Academy of Dance and former Artistic Director of the Royal Ballet. She toured the world with the ballet and told us about some of those travels, including to Soviet Russia during the Cold War. But as a young dancer, she crossed America in 1960 and found a divided country on the cusp of change.
I turned 19 on the day we flew to America, and that was, of course, extraordinary.
You travelled by train across America?
We did, yes, we did a 5-month tour of America. So we started in New York for 6 weeks, and then we went the length and breadth, top and bottom, Canada, the south of the United States. I mean, it was amazing because I couldn't believe that I kept meeting people. For instance, meeting somebody in New York who'd never been to Los Angeles. We were going to do that. And then the other way around, meeting people on the West Coast who'd never been east. But, that was 1960. It was a long time ago. And people didn't travel like they do now. Of course, I discovered that a lot of Americans didn't have passports, which astonished me. And so I kind of drove it home what a very privileged group of people we were, that we were going to make a tour like this. And of course, different audiences everywhere. Tremendous amount of one-night stands, completely exhausting because no hotels. You just slept on the train and then you had to get off at 8 o'clock in the morning. And of course, we were expected to dress properly at all times.
Gloves and...
Well, they had the gloves, but the stockings with the seams straight up the back of the legs, which had to be climbed into in these sort of squeezy little restroom places on the train. I mean, with all of us falling over. And of course, attaching your stockings to... it was all dreadful.
And Monica, I have seen Some Like It Hot.
Yes.
So I know exactly. I've got a very, very clear picture of your train journeys. I'm imagining parties after lights out,
yes.
Cocktails being mixed in the hot water bottles. Tell me.
Well,
that's
no,
true.
not cocktails in the... We had little Dixie cups, they were called, that came out of a sort of a holder in the cloakroom areas where there was running water. It was sort of lukewarm. And the Dixie cups, they were pointy at the bottom. So you couldn't put them down, so you had to hold them. And of course that prompted you to... So it was really, I think, it was on that tour that I discovered that I really liked whiskey.
It's important to make those discoveries.
Yeah.
And as we said, America was a huge country, a divided country at a particularly volatile moment in the early 60s.
Yeah.
And you, as you said, you travelled from the far north to the far south of the country.
Yes.
Did it feel like going to totally different worlds from one to the other?
Very different worlds. I mean, because first of all, being in New York was astonishing to stand in Times Square. And there was that huge billboard, I'm sure many people remember, where he's actually smoking and blowing smoke out of it. It was the most amazing ad. I'm pleased to say I was never tempted. But then, of course, contrast between New York and Chicago. And we were in Chicago for Christmas. It was freezing cold. Having to walk from the hotel to the theatre in minus 20 with a wind chill factor, I don't know what it was, and sort of having to keep going into doorways to sort of defrost your nose hairs. It was freezing cold. And but amazing audiences, of course. The Royal Ballet had made its first American tour in 1949. So when we went, and then they went again in the 50s, I think 3 or 4 times before we did the 60-61 tour. So they already knew that they loved the Royal Ballet, and we were presented by Sol Hurok, an amazing impresario who really knew what he was doing. And then, of course, the West Coast. Suddenly there were palm trees in Los Angeles. And to be staying in a hotel in Hollywood, we kept expecting to see movie stars everywhere. But we didn't. But they did come backstage. You know, when we were at the Shrine Auditorium, we performed there and at the Hollywood Bowl. I can remember Cary Grant coming to the Hollywood Bowl and coming backstage to see Margot Fonteyn, of course. And then Danny Kaye, Judy Garland. You know, there were some big names, and that was astonishing. But then the South was, again, very, very different. I was sort of reminded of South Africa again, because it was like apartheid in the South. We had a member of the orchestra, a violinist, lovely guy. He was black, and he wasn't allowed to play in the orchestra in the South. He wasn't allowed to travel on the buses with us. He wasn't allowed to eat with us. I remember writing home to my mother and saying, you know, this is like being in South Africa, it's horrible. And then, of course, through the 60s, we went many times, and it could have got worse, really, because there were the assassinations. President Kennedy was shot, Martin Luther King. It was a tremendous eye-opener. I mean, I really think there's nothing like travelling for opening your eyes. And, to be 19 and to discover the size of the United States. And at the same time, dancing our socks off, night after night after night after night. I think somewhere I must have a list of all the programs. There is somewhere in an archive. It's recorded, but it was like endless Swan Lakes and Giselles. Sleeping Beauty less so. But I do remember right at the very end of the tour being so exhausted. And we came to it was a one-night stand, and we moved into our dressing room. And I remember saying to one of the girls, what are all these little black currants all over everywhere? And they went, oh, that's rats and mice. So somebody got a cloth, and we sort of swept them off onto the floor, and then sat down and, put on the makeup and got on with the show.
Sometimes you know something's big. Sometimes you make a choice and have no idea your life will never be the same again. Victoria Trevino is an RAD teacher based in Mexico. When the dance school where she was teaching lost its premises, she couldn't bear to see the disappointed students. So she suggested they use her living room. Just for a week or two, right? You qualified as an RAD teacher, and I think you were teaching at a local dance school. And when they needed a temporary base, you suggested your home. Did that seem like a big decision at the time?
No, unfortunately, this school was kicked out of the place where they were renting. And I saw these kids ready for their class, and imagine what they feel when they're at 4:00 ready for the class, and mom and dad are there, and all of a sudden we're in the street. And my house was about 4 blocks away. We were still refurbishing the house, but the living room was free. So I said, look, my house is about 15 minutes away. Let's just walk. It's about 4 blocks away. Let's come all together. I'll make some coffee for the mom and dad, and let's do our ballet class. And I find myself with a few kids, and the parents said, we trust you. You're the one that's giving the class. Let's just keep on going.
Wow.
And that's the way it started.
When did you realise that there was something special about the classes you were running, and that there was more that you felt you could do?
David, I really don't know. I remember a very special moment when all of a sudden I look at my class and I can see more boys and girls. That's when I said, oh.
Now, that is unusual for any ballet teacher.
I see 3 girls and I see 4 boys. And I can see their faces, because I'm always looking at their eyes. And I can see that they were really believing me. Whatever I was saying, they were like, yes, miss. And I can see them trying. And I said, oh my goodness, now I have these guys, and I'm really responsible for what they are going to be living through, what they are thinking right now. This is no joke anymore, because these kids trust me. And these kids believe that ballet is what they want to do. Each day I'm teaching a class, it runs through my mind. Now that years have passed by, this is the most amazing thing, and it does happen. Before it was looking forward to an exam. On Friday, we graduated Alan Oliva from his Advanced 2. Now is, where are they going to dance? It's evolved. It's, of course, we still have groups, but we've created a generation of boys. The 29th of April, was International Ballet Day. And we did a live on Facebook and Instagram with the 5 boys that grew up here. And I can see that. And it was such an epiphany because I see Oliver that now is dancing in the National Ballet Company, Alan that's dancing in the company of Estado de Mexico, a provincial company, and Alan, who is a few days from graduating, Kike, who is graduating from the National, and Sebastian. And those 5 kids started here in my living room.
Remember last summer at the movies, Barbie versus Oppenheimer? We at the RAD were firmly on Team Barbie, especially as one of the stealth pleasures of Greta Gerwig's movie was the way it told the story through some major dance sequences. Jennifer White, the choreographer, is RAD trained, so we take completely undeserved credit for her blowout party routines and genius kenography. It was wonderful to chat to Jennifer immediately after Barbie's opening weekend, when it felt like everyone in the world had seen the movie.
Ryan's emotional journey from having this fight on the beach, this ridiculous fight on the beach, where then he tries to resolve it through dance, and the emotional feeling within that without words, and for all these men to kind of move together and hug each other and pull each other up, like such union, was a really crucial thing. So yeah, they both had their stories inside the dance, which I think in movies, if they're not musicals, they have to really tell that. And there has to have relevance. Otherwise, the big people will be like, why is this dance in here?
Yes.
But both of them were so relevant in that sense.
And both Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie, we know from other movies, really diamond sharp physical performers. But that's not necessarily the same as dancing planned choreography. How easy was it to work with them to kind of get them to both be those really blazing individual performances, but fit the ensemble?
Absolutely. Yeah, they both obviously had previous experience, and Margot definitely came, and she was so fast. I mean, her brain was like a dancer's brain, and she was checking like the and counts and specific moments that only dancers would see and understand. So I was really blown away with her. And she was just having the best time. Ryan, I think he was also fully aware if he didn't play his Ken right, it wouldn't read. And he also knew that if he wasn't confident in what he was doing, it wasn't going to like tell the story. So he was slightly more nervous, but we worked together. We found movements together that he thought were hysterical and kind of made sense to him looking ridiculous, actually. It was more like, I need to look more ridiculous. I shouldn't look cool. Then when we got to his Ken dance, by that point, he'd done the blowout party. So he was fully on board, and I think he'd shot a lot more things and understood his Ken. And so, yeah, he was incredible. I mean, it's like, I think he's done interviews where he says he had to bring the 7-year-old back to him. You know, the one, there's all these videos flying around of him in hammer pants, in these purple hammer pants. So I think he had to like connect to that guy again yeah, which was beautiful.
Yeah.
Because I think we all lose track of our child in us. And I think it's so nice to reconnect. They did incredible.
And you mentioned Greta Gerwig, the director, who loves her movie references, and people have spotted bits of the Red Shoes and the Gene Kelly MGM musicals and Grease. Are you also a bit of a research nerd when it comes to that?
I think I researched what she told me, and on Sunday or Saturday, I can't remember, she would hold a screening in Notting Hill at the Electric for all the cast and crew to come and watch musicals or films that she was inspired by and kind of had relevance to what she was shooting. So that was
nice.
Really cool. And I kind of missed that. It was like a really nice little thing to do on 10 a.m. on, I think, a Saturday morning. Even if I wasn't, she really gathered everyone together to go, let's go and watch Singing in the Rain. I think it was Umbrellas of Cherbourg. Yeah, and many more. But yeah.
And were you trying to take particular moments to reference them, or was it a general kind of vibe? What were you looking for?
It was more a vibe. Obviously, the sets had so much to do with it. And then when Mark Ronson's music arrived, that was just completely enough. So I think I kind of subliminally take in things, but then I always improvise to the music. Me and my associate, Lisa, we just play around for a while and pick things that we liked and didn't like. I never want to take steps, but I think it happens. Some things in the blowout party where it's obviously a Backstreet Boys type punching down and jumping into second. But I always want to try and find my own moves.
Just one more change maker to come in this special episode of Why Dance Matters, made with the RADs Niamh Carey-Furness, Keisha Dodd and Katie Hagan, Bex Glendinning, who did our artwork, and our genius producer, Sarah Miles. Oh, and do take a journey through our back catalogue, which bristles with game-changing guests. We began by saying that change is in the air. Here's one with implications we're still struggling to understand. The way AI, artificial intelligence, is sliding into all our lives. Creating, teaching, maybe nothing will be the same again. Let's end with whiz-bang choreographer Wayne McGregor. He's an instinctive optimist, early adopter and smart collaborator. He mentions the spectacular digital avatars he created for ABBA Voyage. Is AI coming? He's not scared.
The first thing to say is AI is not one thing. And I think when we talk about AI, we tend to lump it together as one set of principles. And I think we have to have a bit more of a sophisticated conversation about what are the areas of AI that are problematic and what are the areas right now of AI that actually are really life-enhancing and empowering. For me, I'm interested in the conversation around AI because I think the possibilities are really extraordinary. We built an AI system with Google, which basically recognizes physical signature and is able to reproduce physical options in the style of certain dancers. So that's a kind of a really interesting thing. We're able to go, okay, these are some permutations of a phrase that have never been done before because they've basically rejected all of the past versions of that in the data set. So these are novel new moves, but they can be danced in the style of a certain dancer because it's been trained on their AI set. So you can recognize it as that dancer doing it. So that's a really interesting conversation around empathy and what we feel about recognizing somebody else's voice. And that's really interesting then when we think about empathy and robotics. So for example, in robots right now, if I was to bring up a fist as if to hit you, and the robot saw that as a fist, as a threat, they'd react in a particular way. But we have got a thing around intentional empathy. So we know the intention of that because I'm kind of smiling or my body's in not a position of force, that you go, he's not really going to hit me, that's a joke. So there's something really interesting about that space between how do we create empathy, what is the physical gesture and the signal, and how does that work? So I'm excited in the potential of AI also in working with young people perhaps that have disabilities. I'm interested in AI's possible repercussions in the future. So wouldn't it be interesting for me to make a piece that I make completely an AI with no human hand and see if critics notice the difference? One of the great things about ABBA, which is really interesting, is people still think those are real people, body doubles on there, even though they've seen it. They believe that to be the case. I'd be curious to combine some technologies, think about motion capture with AI that allows you to have Merce Cunningham back performing live on this table in real time that we can walk around. So I think there are lots of ways in which AI is really extraordinary as a new kind of creative facilitation tool, but we do have to discuss the ethics of it. We have to discuss what it means, what are the constraints, how can we kind of build policy around it to understand it. But creatives have to be in the center of that conversation. Innovators have to be at the center of that conversation. And to be in the center of the conversation, you have to be working with the materials. You can't just watch on the outside and go, none of this is interesting. You have to be in it to have any kind of real experience, real kind of tacit experience of what's going on.